Now moving on to our second section, that is the posterior hip dislocation. In this section, we will be discussing the mechanism of injury which may precipitate posterior hip dislocation, its clinical features, and what are the imaging which is required and how to interpret that imaging, especially when we say an X-ray, and what's the role of CT in posterior hip dislocation, and what is the treatment of posterior hip dislocation. Now, posterior hip dislocation, as I told you, the mechanism of injury determines that actually the position of the femur at the time of injury determines whether it will be anterior or posterior hip dislocation. Usually, posterior hip dislocation occurs especially when there is actually a front-on impact with the dashboard injuries, with the knees are flexed, with hip is slightly flexed as well, with thighs actually adducted and maybe internally rotated as well. Now this kind of a situation produces a lot of stress over the posterior aspect of the acetabulum, and the head actually comes out of the acetabulum posteriorly. Now if there is a force applied to the knee because there is a front-on impact, this results in a posterior dislocation, and femur thrusts proximally in posterior direction and femoral head is forced out posteriorly. If you see this X-ray, as I told you, whenever you are seeing an X-ray, the first thing is to look at the obturator foramen. If you see this and this, these are not two equal. This means something is wrong. But if you can appreciate over here, the head is in central and the shunt line appears intact. This is the shunt line is broken. If you see over here, the shunt line cannot be formed as well. Means the problem lies on the left side. Now there are two types of dislocation, especially when you classify posterior dislocation. It's going to be either simple or complicated or complex. The simple is when there is isolated fracture dislocation without any fracture of the head and neck or even the acetabulum, and when it's called complex is it may be associated with the fracture of the head and neck or acetabulum as well. Often a piece of bone from the acetabulum is sheared off, making a fracture dislocation. That is when it becomes a complex fracture dislocation. Now coming to the clinical features. Isolated posterior hip dislocation, usually the leg, when we will see the patient initially, the leg would be shortened, the knee would be slightly flexed, there will be some degree of flexion at the hip joint as well. There will be some degree of adduction as well as internal rotation of the hip joint as well, and this would show that most likely the patient would be in kind of a lot of distress as well. If you palpate it posteriorly, you may feel the head sometimes as well, but usually sometimes due to the large bulk of gluteal muscles, head may not be palpable as well. Now once you see this is important that this patient has suffered from a trauma as well. There is a motor vehicle crash as well. The management has to go as per ATLS guidelines. This could be an ipsilateral if it is a complex kind of a dislocation, there could be an ipsilateral femoral fracture as well. Position may not be very typical. We should have a very high index of suspicion for neck, head as well as shaft of femur fracture. And what is important is that you need to look at that if that leg, for example, it's left leg which is dislocated, there may be associated contralateral femur or a tibia fracture as well, because this could be a case of polytrauma. So whenever you're reviewing that patient, you just don't need to look at the dislocation, you need to look at the patient as a whole. And again, as per ATLS guidelines, the management starts with the airway and cervical spine, not with the reduction of the hip dislocation. Knee must be examined for bruising as well as ligamentous injuries, but that is when you are in the doing the survey. Neurovascular status of the limb must be determined as well. Provided the patient is vitally stable and this appears to be an isolated injury, then if you are examining the musculoskeletal system only, then you need to look at the hip as well as the knee as well as the neurovascular structures, because this kind of a dislocation may be associated with sciatic nerve palsy, or it could be simply associated with vascular injury as well. Or the problem may not be over here. The problem may be this isolated dislocation, a simple dislocation over here, but there is maybe another associated vascular injury down somewhere around the knee as well. So you need to look first. You need to look the patient as a whole as per ATLS guidelines, and once you come across the hip joint and the leg, then you need to look at the leg as a whole, then whether there may be problems associated with the knee as well as the ankle joint as well. And sciatic nerve must be neurovascular status when we discuss, we'll be thinking of it. Then we have to keep it in mind that sciatic nerve may be stretched or maybe torn or maybe at risk as well. Now this is the classical picture of a patient with a posterior hip dislocation. If you see, this is the leg, this is, if we compare the malleoli, it's slightly shortened. The knee and hip are slightly flexed with adduction as well as internal rotation at the hip joint. And if you see the x-ray, so this is the kind of an x-ray, sometimes the x-ray may not be very much clear. You are not sure whether it looks like this is a simple dislocation, but if you see this fragment, there may be associated acetabular fracture. Now, if you see, this is another shadow of there may be a complex dislocation. It may look simple straight away. That is where the role of x-ray as well as CT comes in. Sometimes if you are in doubt, you always can go for a CT. But if the post reduction, if this is the kind of a situation you're not sure whether after close reduction the joint is reduced or not, then the best option to go for is the CT. Because sometimes what happens is it's not a simple dislocation, it's actually a complex dislocation. And once we have reduced it closely and we get a CT, we realize that there is actually a bony chip which is actually present right into the joint. So that is actually not only makes the reduction unstable, and there is always a chance for the femoral head to subluxate or dislocate again. But there would be another problem is that it would be this will not be concentric reduction as well. So we have to sometimes go for open reduction, internal fixation in that case, because we need concentric reductions as well as the head should be not be subluxated but fully located into the joint. Then there is a Thompson and Epstein classification. This classification is actually associated with for the posterior hip dislocation. The type 1 indicates a dislocation with no more than minor chip fractures. These are all actually classification of complex posterior hip dislocations. Type 2 is dislocation with single large bony fragment posterior acetabular wall. In a way, it's important that so there is always an inter-observer variability, but generally it's a large piece, a small piece would be probably agreed upon. Type 3 is dislocation with comminuted fragments of the posterior acetabular wall. That is something which is very much visible. There is a comminuted fracture of the posterior acetabular wall, which may require fixation as well. Type 4 is dislocation of fracture through the acetabular floor. And type 5 is dislocation with a fracture through the acetabular floor and femoral head. Now that is important to remember over here is that actually as if this is the acetabulum and head is inside, as it goes out, it can take a chip out of it. It can take a large bony piece, it becomes type 2. If it is associated with first a comminuted fracture and then the head comes out, this will result in a type 3 kind of a fracture. In type 4, actually, instead of going more posteriorly, the head goes posterior inferiorly with the fracture of the floor of the acetabulum. And in the 5th type, there is the energy is so massive that this not only have produced a fracture of the acetabulum, but there is also associated fracture of the head of the femur as well. And when the head may be dislocated and small part may be placed in the centrally in the joint as well. And when you see the x-ray, you could appreciate there is actually a comminuted acetabular wall fracture, there is posterior dislocation, and small part of a head is still lying inside the near to the fovea inside the joint actually. Now coming to the treatment, as I told you, treatment of this, you don't need to treat the dislocation, you need to treat the patient. Treatment starts as per ATLS guidelines. But if provided there are no other associated problems and this is an isolated issue for the patient, then you have to reduce the dislocation as soon as possible. That is usually emergent reduction of the dislocation. Risk osteonecrosis and subsequent osteoarthritis still may occur despite reduction within the 6 hours as well. Usually it's always done under the GA. And close reduction is avoided if associated with femoral neck fractures. What is important is that if it's a femoral neck or head fractures, then you need to fix the head neck as well. You cannot just leave it out, because later on it could result to AVN of the femoral head. Now there are multiple maneuvers. This is called as Robert Jones maneuver. There's a Bigelow maneuver. There's an Ellis maneuver, but most commonly performed maneuver is actually the Ellis maneuver for the close reduction of posterior hip. The patient is lying supine, preferably as close to the ground as possible, and usually the patient is in GHG. Why G is given? Because the muscles are all relaxed, patient is stable, and because hip abductors and adductors are quite strong, so it's easy for the doctors to actually reduce the hip joint. There is an assistant who is helping the person who is reducing it by placing both hands with the anterior superior iliac spine. That is helping to stabilize the pelvis in this form. Then the person who is reducing it, the first person who actually first applies a longitudinal traction in the line of the femur or in the line axis of the femur. That is actually just to, if the head is lying over here, it will come right over here, but it still will be dislocated. Now initially the knee was at 90 degree. Then you take the knee, further elevate the knee and make the hip 90 degree flexed as well. So actually the knee is flexed 90 degree, then hip is flexed 90 degree. And once that position is achieved, the patient is lying on the floor, and the person who is actually reducing it will slightly adduct the knee over here and then internally rotate it as per the maneuver. Will this result in a clunk, which would further bring back the head back into the acetabular socket? And this usually, if it's associated with it's a simple dislocation, definitive clunk which can be felt as well. But if it is associated with a acetabular fracture as well, then probably because of the fracture, the bone integrity of the acetabular wall is not that much intact. We may not be able to feel that type of a clunk, but there may be only a click as well. But what's important is that we have to understand that if there is a clunk, that means there's a definite reduction. But if there's a click, there may be this may not be reduced as well, or what this could be is that the hip which is reduced is unstable because of some fragments of the bone which are lying intraarticularly. So you need to check it on a fluoroscope, especially in the case of operation theater. And if it is satisfying clunk, then yes, you can appreciate it. Then you can just get a check on the fluoroscope, and once stabilize the patient in that position. After reducing it, then we can get for the check x-rays later on. Stability testing is very important. Why it is important? Because we need to make sure that what the close reduction we have done is that the head remains inside the acetabulum. For example, if this was associated with neck or head femur fracture, then the head may be unstable, or it may be subluxed in the joint, or there may be some bony fragment of the acetabular wall which may be present intraarticularly and is not actually letting the head getting reduced into the acetabular socket. So how to check the stability is flexing the hip to 90 degrees, applying longitudinal and posterior directional force as the way it was during the trauma, and hip is screened on image intensifier. Subluxation is associated with significant fractures, especially if it's a comminuted acetabular wall fractures. The hip may be subluxed as well. In that case, we will have to go for open reduction internal fixation. Why? Because open reduction may be important as well, because we cannot leave the hip in a subluxed or this kind of a position, because it can redislocate later on, and that could be more damaging for the patient, especially this could be associated with neurovascular compromise. This could be associated with higher chances of osteoarthritis and osteonecrosis of the femoral head. So if the hip is unstable, it's subluxating or dislocating again and again, on the table, we must go for open reduction internal fixation. Or if there is actually a bony fragment which is lying intraarticularly and not letting the hip reduce, then that has to be removed by open reduction internal fixation method. Now coming to the post-reduction management. Hip with an isolated dislocation, usually if the reduction is successful, following reduction, patient can weight bear as tolerated and protected with aid of the crutches. Patient can be kept non-weight bearing for at least 2 to 3 weeks, but as gradually weight bearing can be started, and by 6 to 8 weeks, patient may be completely weight bearing on the same hip joint. If stable hips, congruent following the reduction with the fractures, then it can be managed conservatively and non-weight bearing is usually preferred. But if we have done the surgery, then we may have to delay the weight bearing a little more than conservative management. Now coming to the complications. Complications could be what happened at the time of injury, and it could be with the time between the close reduction and injury, because the more the head will remain outside the joint, there would be increased chances of osteonecrosis. Some of the complications include sciatic nerve injury, which can happen at the time of trauma as well. Could be a vascular injury, associated fracture, femoral shaft, neck, or even the head of the femur fracture as well. And then there are late fractures. Despite the early reduction, there may be associated with osteonecrosis of femoral head. There may be myositis ossificans. Then if it's unreduced or subluxed, and if it's left subluxed, this will actually lead to joint pathology and pathomechanics, which may eventually impair walking and will be very painful hip. And it could be leading to osteoarthritis as well, and which may eventually require total hip replacement. Or there could be recurrent instability as well, especially if there is the capsule was torn and there is always a chance and the bony wall is not present properly. There is a chance with the trivial trauma they can result in a hip dislocation again and again. In this section, we will briefly gone through the posterior hip dislocation. We have discussed the mechanism of injury. The most commonly, the hip dislocates posteriorly when the front on impact with the knee flexed, hip is flexed, and actually the hip is slightly adducted, internally rotated. This may be a simple fracture, simple dislocation without any associated fracture, or it could be complex dislocation, which may be associated with fractures of the neck, head, or even the acetabular wall. There is a Thompson and Epstein classification, which actually is associated with of the complex posterior dislocation. Type 1 is maybe associated with a minor chip fracture. Type 2 may be with a large fragment of the acetabulum. Type 3 is the comminuted fracture of the acetabulum. Type 4 is the fracture through the roof of through the floor of the acetabulum. And type 5 is associated with femoral head fractures along with the acetabular fractures. And as the types increases, the severity increases and the prognosis actually decreases. What is important is that it's a posterior dislocation. The most importantly is to be reduced on emergent basis. Close reduction must be done as early as possible. There are multiple maneuvers, but most commonly we can use an Alice maneuver, in which the hip is stabilized, the knee and hip at 90 degrees. The examiner actually internally rotates and adducts the thigh so that the hip reduces back with a clunk. Later on, stability must be checked. If the hip remains unstable, then we may have to go for an open reduction of the hip, as well as prompt surgical treatment may be required. Later on, if the closed reduction was successful, then we can keep the patient non-weight bearing for a few weeks, then partial weight bearing and eventually full weight bearing can be started without much of a problem. Thank you very much. Keep watching sqadia.com.